Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to be participating in this webinar. I think it's a super important topic, and I think that many schools, teachers, administrators, and people in the educational field are really facing a lot of adversity and also the challenges that come with trying to learn about our new students and what we can do to help them succeed. Some of the things about me and my district is that, as was mentioned, I teach in Illinois. I'm a physical education teacher, about 27 years or so now that I've been teaching. I'm at Washington Elementary, which is part of U46. That is the second largest school district in the state of Illinois. The only larger district is the Chicago Public Schools. So with that comes a lot of diversity, a lot of challenges, a lot of great programs that are within our district as well. So I am bilingual in Spanish. I'm a proud daughter of an immigrant mother who comes from Ecuador, but I am US born. I spend a lot of time learning, creating, and exploring ways in which I can include movement and integrate it with academic content area. I've established within my own building a program called Active Content Time, which I abbreviate as ACT, and where teachers collaborate with me on concepts and areas, academic areas that students are struggling with, and we include movement. The Active Content Time has been a really great program for our students because it allows them to focus on some academic content that they might be struggling with, and most of the time it is math fluency, and we do that by incorporating movement. So it's a way for them to learn in a kinesthetic way and continue to practice some of those areas that they might be deficient in, while also getting the opportunity to move their bodies and also touch on some of the skills that I work on in PE. So as I mentioned earlier, U46 is the second largest district in Illinois. My building itself is a dual language building with around 400 students. And in each grade level, we have at least one dual language section. So, and many of the times it's two. Our students have mainly come from Mexico, where their parents are either born there and they are as well, or their parents were born there and they've migrated to the US, and then the students themselves have been born in the US. But there's been a recent change in the last couple of years where we're seeing a lot more students coming to us from various different countries that speak Spanish. So the majority of our immigrant students are of Spanish-speaking language. So those include countries like Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, Venezuela. I know that there was a time where I came across a couple of students from Ecuador, so it was kind of nice to make that connection with them. And the students, if you notice, and if you've experienced this, even though they might speak the same language, they have different words to describe certain things. So depending on the dialect, that's something that our language resource teacher is working on, trying to understand and have them describe what they use as a word to describe a certain situation, picture, or not. So that is something that they've been working on, and seeing that also helps us as teachers to understand, how to better communicate with them. They've also been discussing acceptance. We've received a lot of students from other Hispanic countries, and a lot of those are now of Afro-Latino roots. And so in the past, most of our students have come from Mexico, and there wasn't an Afro-Latino root, and some of the new students do come from that type of root. And so we've had a lot of conversations about the differences between the Hispanic countries and how some of them might have different skin colors. So that's been something that has been discussed a lot lately. We do have like a language resource teacher that was just created this year to help manage and help our students be successful who are here as immigrants. So we have a language resource teacher who is specifically working with these immigrant students, because we have a large amount in our district. In our school alone, since from around June, we have about 23 or 24 new immigrant students just in our school. And overall in our district, I can't remember what the overall number is, but it's growing, and we get new ones. In my school, we get new students every week almost, it seems like, and a lot of times they are immigrant students. So there's a lot to try to learn about our students and how we can best help them, make them feel welcome, and then also learn a little bit more about them so that we can make sure that they are feeling welcome and successful. So I think, and as cliche as it seems or sounds, I think movement is just a universal language. I think PE offers a safe space where language barriers play less of a significant role and physical activity becomes more of the vehicle for communication between students. These were some of the responses that our language resource teacher provided for me. I asked her to ask the question, how has physical education helped you feel part of our school community? Because we want to make sure that they're feeling welcome, that they feel like they belong to our community. And so these were just some of the responses, and they're in Spanish, so I will go ahead and kind of translate those for you on how they feel that PE class helps them to feel part of our school community. One of them says the teacher speaks in English and Spanish, and so that really helps us to learn new words. Another student says it makes me feel comfortable in school because I can take part and share experiences with other students. It also helps us take part with other students in a space with other students who do not speak the same language as me. And then another one also said, cuando voy a clase de educación física, so when I go to PE class with other students who speak other languages, this gives me an opportunity to be able to share experiences with these students who speak different languages, and it allows them to learn more. So the overall responses from these students have been positive. And so I think it's really important to note that physical education can be a very positive experience for our students who are coming to us with different languages, with different cultures. So I was trying to think about the different ways in which I can talk about how PE can impact immigrant students and how sports and movement unite these different children. I feel like it is an opportunity for shared experiences, just like some of the students responded. If we are intentional with our curriculum planning, we have the ability to create these experiences for our students where they're able to engage in activities alongside their peers, with their peers. Through movement, students can begin to build bonds and establish a rapport with one another. They can collaborate towards a common goal, and they can communicate with one another. In doing so, cultural, social, and language barriers start to break down. The other way in which PE plays a big role in uniting students is communication. Many of the fundamental movement and sports skills that we teach are nonverbal. And so we use our body language, we use the use of cues and gestures to help communicate our point. So communication is a big role because we are using nonverbal ways. We're using a kinesthetic way to communicate with our students most of the time. We have the ability to teach to the kinesthetic domain, even though I feel PE is a very special content area where we're touching on all of the learning domains. We're probably the only content area that touches on all of the learning domains. Obviously, we are focusing on the kinesthetic, and in this webinar, that's the most important thing to touch on, right? Because we're using our body and gestures and different ways to communicate with our students where the language barrier isn't going to be so prevalent. It allows these students a level playing field where their barriers are very minimal. And if the instruction is delivered in a way that best allows for success, it allows these students to fully participate and connect with their peers and teachers. With the technology that most of us have available to us nowadays, this plays a huge role in the way we can communicate with our students and allow them to learn, comprehend, and practice. So things like using videos, slide decks, GIFs are a huge thing that we can use as PE teachers because first of all, it allows the teacher to work more individually with students so that they can reach that success, but it also allows the students to learn at their own pace and feel like they have a visual representation of what they're learning paired with any text or auditory that they're hearing, any auditory instruction. It allows the students to just have that more individualized instruction. If you could allow students opportunities to discuss prompts or answer in their own native language at times, I feel like that is really helpful, or it has been helpful to my students. I often do walk-in talks as they come in for an instant activity. So I will have a picture displayed with a prompt in English, and in my school building, and then a prompt underneath in Spanish as well. I'm lucky that I'm able to speak that language and be able to connect with most of my students. So when I give these instructions, I do my best to try and translate as much as I can with time permitting. So, oftentimes it takes me a lot longer to deliver my instruction because I do want to be able to translate for those students, especially our newcomers and immigrants that maybe have only been here a few short weeks, sometimes days, less than a month. And so I want to make sure that they feel welcomed. And I feel that by being able to speak their language, this is really helpful to them. It allows them to feel welcome and safe and a person that they can approach. I think also seeking out students who can help with the translation is a really important thing to consider. If you have seating arrangements in your PE classes, try to put them in a position where they do have someone around them that can help them translate. Also, maybe up front where they can see your slide deck if you're using a TV or a projector screen to teach from. I do have a lot of math concepts and things and how I pair them, and I can certainly talk about that a little bit later because that is something that I embed within my instruction, but it's also a big part of my ACT program. So I think big picture is to provide a lot of visuals for your students. Have text paired with pictures. If you're able to translate some important words that you're going to repeat over and over, do that and say it out loud. Maybe learn how to pronounce some of those words so that they are able to hear it in English and in Spanish or whichever language you are working with. Demonstrate, which is just best practice all around for physical educators. So you want to make sure you're demonstrating. You want to make sure that you are providing a kinesthetic model to the auditory instruction you're giving them. So that's super important. Give them visual cues with that auditory explanation. Use cues that are short and to the point so that you're chunking that information. You're not overwhelming them with a lot of words that they might have a hard time understanding. Consider a visual storyboard for directions or the use of slides that include pictures paired with text, like 1, enter the gym, 2, sit down, those kinds of things that they get used to and can identify with. Another way in which PE can really contribute to uniting our students through movement and sports is it allows them to build their confidence. And it was mentioned already earlier, building confidence is a huge thing. PE class might be one of the few areas in where those immigrant students are going to feel success instantly. So it's important to remember that. They might struggle with the language in the classroom on certain topics and certain content areas, but when they come to PE or they might go to art class, it's something that they might be able to show their skill set and feel success right away. And we want to make sure that we capitalize on that because when they are feeling success, they're starting to build their confidence. It can lead to an increase in self-esteem and confidence among immigrant children, helping them feel more integrated and part of their new community, which is what we want. We want them to feel like they are part of our school community. As their self-esteem and confidence grows, so does their ability to excel, which in turn then allows them to establish new friendships with their peers and respect from their peers, regardless of any language or cultural differences that they might have. Consider providing autonomy within your lesson, allowing for choice of equipment, having a voice as was mentioned earlier, and even choosing their partners. Vary your activities so that there are opportunities for individual, partner work, small group, and whole group activities so that you're having them work individually where they might feel more comfortable, small groups and partners where it doesn't seem so overwhelming to be able to communicate with a large group, and then also have that whole group opportunity. PE is also a great place for cultural exchange. As PE professionals, we have the ability to use our time with these students as a platform for a cultural exchange. Introducing activities and sports that either originate or are dominant in their home country is an excellent opportunity for mutual appreciation, growth, and learning. I think it was mentioned earlier that netball was something she was very good at and familiar with, but then coming to the US, it wasn't something that was being taught or she had the opportunity to practice. So imagine if we took the time to get to know our students, especially those newcomers and immigrants, and what their interests might be, we might be able to integrate some of those units and allow them to really have an opportunity to shine with something they're familiar with. When we do that, it's a great way to promote inclusivity and respect for diversity. Some suggestions that I might make would be using a diverse representation of athletes when looking for examples, whether it be videos or GIFs or posters or any other graphics that are hung in your teaching space, talking about the different types of units or sports that you might find in other parts of the world is a great way to expose all of our students to a variety of activities, because at the end of the day in PE, our main objective is to make sure that we are developing students that are going to be confident movers. And that might mean that we need to expose them to a variety of activities. We don't want to stay to just the traditional. We want a huge variety of activities so they can find their niche and end up being very confident movers as adults. Because if they're confident movers as students into adolescence and then adults, they're learning how to live a healthier, longer lifestyle. When playing games, allow the students to use countries. This is just a suggestion I have for PE teachers, or you could probably even use this and modify it to make it work in the classroom. Play games or activities where you're using countries as their team names or stations, and then have a little informational blurb underneath that country that allows them to learn a little bit about that country. If you're teaching older students and they're allowed to use your phones, you can have QR codes there where it takes them straight to that country with a little bit of information about that country, or maybe even famous athletes that come from those countries or speak that language. You can use the countries, you can use flags, you can use world events like World Cup soccer or the Olympics to really talk about and promote diversity and learn about all the different countries. Include famous athletes, writers, artists, singers, etc., from their native countries. And also thinking about PE and how we can unite our students is promoting inclusion. And I think that's just good practice overall, no matter what content area you teach or no matter what demographic of student you're teaching. We want to make sure that we are welcoming our students. Just like shared experiences we cultivate through our curriculum planning, we have the ability to plan for activities that promote an inclusive environment for all students, regardless of their background, what language they are dominant in, whatever their native country is, or their ability. We want to make sure that it's inclusive for all students, where our differences are celebrated and they're a point of growth and learning. We can structure activities. We can structure these activities that encourage communication, respect, trust, cooperation, problem solving. Team building is a great way to do this. And it's something that you're probably going to front load heavily in the beginning of the school year. But in cases like my school, where I'm getting newcomers and immigrants throughout the school year, I want to make sure that then I'm using some icebreakers throughout my school year so that I'm promoting that kind of team building and cooperative play together. We can be intentional in the way we group our students so that they are exposed to a variety of students within their class, making sure to include at least one student that can assist in translating. We can learn how to say common words in their native language and use graphics paired with text in multiple languages to not only help them with learning, but to also demonstrate an inclusive environment. When using pictures of people, be sure to display a representation that is inclusive of their culture and their color of their skin. And if you're using music, research the different artists and music that might be typical, trending, or popular within their native countries. I always try to play different types of Spanish language music that obviously is appropriate for the school that I'm teaching at, but it's a way of feeling welcome because it might be music that they hear at home by their parents or whoever their caregivers are. So as long as it is appropriate and clean, I really do try to incorporate a lot of that, and not just in my dual language classes, but in my general ed classes as well. Just some additional thoughts that I have in talking to our resource language teacher and just thinking about my school in particular. I think, reaching out to the classroom teachers and finding out more information about the students is something you can never go wrong with. And one of the things that I probably should have mentioned from the very beginning, no matter whether your students are immigrants, English speaking, whatever their background might be, the best thing that you can do as a teacher or an adult that's working with students is to learn about them. We need to take the time to learn about our students because we're seeing them confined to the four walls of your classroom or however you're servicing them. We need to make sure that we're taking the time to learn about them so that we know a little bit more about them beyond the walls of your teaching environment. Collaborate with other teachers, or you might be able to integrate academic content with movement. Have a survey for newcomers to fill out in their native language and with help if needed, that tells you a little bit more about them and their interests. And that will allow you maybe to find ways to integrate some of those interests into your curriculum. Be intentional in your lesson planning to include team building activities, incorporate icebreakers like I mentioned earlier, and do that consistently. Maybe that's a way that you introduce your instant activity or warm up for PE. It's an icebreaker that really is helping to promote inclusivity and working together and collaborating. Learning the correct pronunciation of their names is important, making sure that you're not shortening them or giving them a nickname. Try to include as many pictures paired with text. Translate text in both English and their native language whenever possible. Use a word wall with multiple languages and pictures. I know in my gym, I have a word wall and I have the English words underneath that letter and then Spanish words that we might see within PE underneath that letter. Understand the differences in dialects with one language. Provide opportunities for students outside of school to become involved with other students, especially through movement and sports. Think about the different community, different organizations within your community, and invite them to come in and maybe speak to your students, especially if there's opportunities for them to participate in sports. Because as was mentioned earlier, a lot of times, oftentimes, at least in my building, the parents are very busy trying to make ends meet so that they can provide a better life for their students here in the United States or their children in the United States. So sometimes they're not home, they're working 2 and 3 jobs. Sometimes older siblings are in charge of taking care of the younger siblings, cooking dinner for them, helping them with their homework. So they might not be afforded the opportunity that others have to participate in sports outside of school. So with that being said, then you really need to think about how you might be able to provide those opportunities at school. So ways that you can do that might be to come up with different clubs, different types of programs that might come to your school and provide opportunities for your students for movement and sports, or running a club. Our school is really great about providing different experiences for our students. Last year, we had one of our staff members do a club with some of our girls in, I think it was 1st through 3rd grade maybe, and it was a dancing club. And they learned how to do some traditional Mexican dancing and in the traditional folkloric kind of attire. And then they put on a performance at the end of the school year for the whole school, where parents were invited to come and watch their child perform. So these are ways in which you can unite not just the students, but their parents too. They feel part of this community. Examples of different organizations might be some of the athletic teams that are in your community, whether it's a club soccer or a professional sport in the NFL or NBA. Maybe they have some outreach or community programs that can come to your school. I know in Chicago, we have worked with the Chicago Bears. They have a mini monsters camp where they come in and they run the whole program with our students and run them through 6 different stations. I invite the parents to come and help volunteer. One way to get your word out is, try to communicate with them. As a PE teacher, you can either have a web page where you're having this kind of information. If your classroom colleagues have the Remind app, you can ask them to communicate with them through their classroom teacher. We have a Facebook page for our school. So if you have access to it, I have access to ours. I'm constantly showing videos of things that we're doing in class. And then if we have any organizational communities coming in I give them information for that as well on there. I look for volunteers that way. And then I really rely on our teachers, our classroom teachers, to help me with the communication, because they're seeing their students every day. I don't have the opportunity to see my students every day. So I try to find creative ways to get them to see what we're doing in PE. Host informational meetings for your parents. And then maybe your school also has different family and community events where they're invited to come. I know at the beginning of the school year, we have like a picnic in the park. Our families call our playground area a park. And so they'll come and hang out there before and after school. So we had a picnic in the park where we had hot dogs, where a community organization provided the food and beverage along with our PTO. So things like that really help to have not just your students, but your families involved and feeling like they're welcome and part of this new community. Being able to connect with them is a great thing because you're establishing a rapport with your parents and your students. And just make sure that you're seeking out opportunities where you can get the community involved. Find multiple ways for students to demonstrate comprehension and mastery of a skill. Don't just rely on one method to assess them. Use pictures, use peer assessment so that they can see it and work with just one student. Make sure that you are having welcoming signs in their native languages so that they feel part of your community. And I think I was trying to rush through it as well. I think I've touched on everything, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the active content time later on during the Q&A if you have specific questions about that. But providing that movement, or I like to call them brain boosts instead of brain breaks in the classroom, is a great way to get them to not only just use movement, but allow them to express themselves in a kinesthetic way. So thank you for having me. I'm sorry if I rushed through.